jub daal mooy li wóor fexeel ba yéer bu leer na nga fexeel ba wane waaw li tax ñu wóolu la góor baax na jigéen baax na jub daal mooy li wóor fexeel ba yéeg bu leer na nga fexeel ba wane waaw li tax ñu wóolu la Jimbori ngone burdali Jimbori ngone burdali Jimbori dafa falu buur moo tax mu jàpp ku deful dara dëpp di koy door Jimbori Jimbori ngone burdali Jimbori dafa falu buur moo tax mu jàpp ku deful dara dëpp di koy door Jimbori su dee loo war a wax ko daal mu jeex su dee loo war a joxe jox ko ñàkk moom su dee loo war a dox ko ba mu mat bay fexeel ba yee bu leer na nga fexeel ba wane waaw li tax ñu wóolu la waxuma la dara waaye wóolu giñ la wóolu bu ko fowee yow àndal lu boolo bilaay dinkaan laawa yow àndal lu boolo bilaay dinkaan ne waaw bilaay àndal lu boolo dëgg dëgg sàmmal ma waaw bilaay àndal lu boolo dëgg dëgg moytul ma waaw bilaay àndal lu boolo sàmmal ma waaw bilaay àndal lu boolo dëgg dëgg maanu ci waaw danga war a gore dikaane loo moomul maanu cooy yow àndal lu boolo dëgg dëgg
organisation. But I would say, and I think it's really important, I think we do have a special status in the EU already. We're not in the euro, we've got our own currency. We're not in the no-border zone, we've kept our own borders. We're now going to be out of the ever-closer union proposal, so our membership is right for Britain. It gives us the trade, it gives us the cooperation, it helps us work with other countries to get what we want. Now, in terms of reform, I think the things I secured do really help us. They safeguard our currency. It means we can't be discriminated against. They make sure that there are targets for cutting the regulations on business that people can find frustrating. And so, yes, the reform goes on. But, of course, if we leave, the reform ends. And here's what really happens if we leave. Of course, we'd still want to sell into that single market. So we still have to meet all the rules and the regulations that Brussels lays down, but we won't be at the table. We'll be like a country with our ear and our face pressed up against the glass, trying to find out what's happening with the other 27 countries, making rules that affect our country. And I would say that is no way for the fifth biggest country, biggest economy in the world to behave. We need to be in this organisation, fighting for British interests and for British jobs. Leaving is quitting. And I don't think we're quitters. I think we're fighters. We fight in these organisations for what we think is right.
Surely when you went for that deal, that was the opportunity to say, I've got this referendum coming. This is my opportunity to get the deal that will be right for Britain. But you weren't able to achieve that. Well, I don't see how we're going to be able to achieve that later on down the line.
Well, sir, you mentioned specifically the issue of benefits. And one of my key demands, which I got, was to say, if you come here, you don't get unemployment benefit. If you haven't got a job after 6 months, you have to leave. It is the free movement to come and work, but it's not the free movement to come and live off someone else's taxpayers. And uniquely in Britain, you're going to have to work here for 4 years, paying into the system, contributing to our economy, before you get full access to our welfare system. Okay. I think that is a really good proposal, and one, of course, that we only get if we stay. If we leave, reform is over, and I worry for what would happen to our economy and the jobs and the livelihoods of people, which I think is the most important thing in this referendum.
Thank you very much indeed. And just on a point of information on that, by how many figures do you expect the migration from the EU to fall as a result of the reform that you secured?
I haven't made a forecast because, frankly, we've had pretty extraordinary years recently in the European Union. The first 5 years I was Prime Minister, our economy created more jobs than the rest of the European Union put together. And so we have seen a lot of people coming to live and coming to work here. Actually, 9 out of 10 people in work are British nationals. 2/3 of the jobs created since I've been Prime Minister have been British people taking those jobs. So I'm not going to make a forecast, but I think it stands to sense. If today you can come in from the EU and get £10,000 of tax credits on top of your wages, and I'm saying you're not going to have that in future, clearly that will make a difference.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Mr Cameron, for taking that point. And we get a question now on sovereignty from James Esses.
Mr Cameron, we recently celebrated the 800th anniversary of the Magna Carta. The United Kingdom has been built on the pillars of democracy, and we have the greatest legal system in the world. Is it not shameful that since joining the EU, our Parliament is no longer sovereign, our Supreme Court is no longer supreme, and our nation is no longer self-governing?
Well, so what I would say... First of all, I think we're engaged in the greatest act of national sovereignty that we've had for many years, a referendum where not the politicians, but the people will decide whether we stay in this organisation or whether we leave. And I would say, having been your Prime Minister for the last 6 years, Parliament is sovereign. We've just had a Queen's speech with a whole set of proposals and measures, some of which you might agree with and some of which you might disagree with, but they're British proposals for the British people from a British government. Now, you hear a lot of talk about patriotism in this referendum. As far as I'm concerned, I love this country with a passion. I think we're an amazing country. And I say if you love your country, then you don't damage its economy. You don't restrict opportunities for young people. You don't actually isolate your country and reduce its influence in the world. And frankly, I do worry about a second Scottish referendum if we vote to leave. And you don't strengthen your country by leading to its breakup. So I'm deeply patriotic. I think this is a case for a bigger, greater Britain inside a European Union. And let me go directly to this point about... Sorry, please do.
Your own House of Commons library has estimated that up to 55% of our laws are made by Europe, i.e. unelected bureaucrats, and we also are in the position that our own Supreme Court judges can be overruled by European judges, some of whom may never have even stepped foot in this country. It's a disgrace.
Say is, to me, what really matters. True sovereignty is about control. Do you have control over your country's destiny? We're a trading nation. We need access to the single market. If we leave, it still exists, the EU still exists, we have to sell into that market. We'd have to obey every single one of the rules and regulations to sell into that market, but we'd have no say over what they are. Let's take the car industry again. I want to make sure we're around that table writing the rules for electric cars. I want us to be the leader. I want us to be the winners in Europe and in the world when it comes to technologies like this. And we don't enhance our influence by walking away or quitting. We reduce our influence. So it might give you the illusion of sovereignty to withdraw on June the 23rd, but you'd find out in area after area after area, things that affect our great country, we would have no say over. When we want to try and make sure Iran can't get a nuclear weapon, when we want to be strong in front of Putin's aggression in the Ukraine, we need to work in these organizations. We need to work in NATO. We need to work in the UN. And yes, we need to work in the EU. Sometimes it can drive me mad, right? It is a bureaucracy. It is frustrating. But I honestly believe walking away, quitting, would reduce our national influence, would reduce our economy, would reduce our say in the world, and as a result would damage our country.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Cameron. Thank you also to James for your question. And we have a question now also on similar issues from Joseph Cook.
Mr. Cameron, I know that we're all meant to elect our local MEP, but every time I ask my customers coming into my shop, who is your MEP, not one of them has got a clue. None. Now, that is shameful on our part, and it's shameful that the EU isn't reaching out where it should be. We just don't know who they are. We've got not a clue. And that is, I've been asked, especially with the referendum coming up, I've asked many of them, so many of them, and not one knows. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't want the European Parliament or the European Union to have more power. I want the power to reside in our Parliament. And if this is an important point, I think, for people who are concerned about the future, if there's any proposal to pass further powers from our Parliament to Brussels, automatically there has to be a referendum. So there's a lock on whether more powers can be passed. Does Brussels need reform? Yes. Do these institutions need opening up? Yes. Can it be frustrating sometimes? Of course it can. But the question we've got to ask ourselves in this referendum is not, do I like the European Parliament? Frankly, I don't like it very much. The question we've got to ask ourselves, are we better off? Are we stronger? Are we safer if we stay in this organisation or if we leave? That's the question on the ballot paper. And I hope people, I'm sure, will share many of my frustrations about the European Union, but frustrations with an institution or indeed with a relationship, are often not a justification for walking away. They're an argument for staying and fighting for what you need, for jobs, for investment, for security for our country.
Joseph, thank you very much indeed for that question. We're going to press on a question with, on law and order from Peter Thompson.
Mr Cameron, just today we have seen yet more evidence of the type of crimes committed by EU nationals who have records in their home country and come here to commit more crimes. If we remain in the EU, how can we protect the public from the EU nationals who have committed offences in our home countries?
Peter, very good question. I can answer it very specifically. First of all, we will keep our border controls. We can stop anyone at our border, EU nationals included, and if we think they're a risk to our country, we don't have to let them in. And in my renegotiation, I strengthened that to give us more freedom to do that. First point. Second point, we've got a lot of European and other foreign nationals in our prisons. And one of my greatest frustrations as Prime Minister is going around to some of these countries, whether it's going to Nigeria or Jamaica or Pakistan, and trying to get foreign nationals out of our prisons and over to the countries where they came from. In Europe, we do at least have a directive on prisoner transfers, which is now coming into force, and we'll be able to get those people out of our prisons so they can be paid for by the governments whose citizens they are. Now, if we leave, we'll be back to the situation that we had before, far, far more difficult to get these people out of our country. Please come back.
The 50 names and individuals that were released today in the press, you, the government, tried to get them out of the country because they've committed